State, and it's one of my great joys here. Today, our presentation is brought to you by the RVAR Education Committee. And this is a hybrid class, so we've got folks on Zoom and we've got folks in person. Laura Benjamin is joining us from our office. She'll monitor everybody on Zoom. So if you have a question and you want to type it in, she'll let me know and we'll convey that over. We will stop at some point for questions as well. And we can ask questions then as well. Today's class will be recorded and it'll be on YouTube channel for at least 90 days. We don't leave it there forever. Sometimes things aren't relevant anymore. Before we get started, let me mention a couple of the upcoming classes. We've got Leveraging AI in Your Business. That's by the Technology Committee, and that'll be on Tuesday, June 25th. And I believe you've got a handout with some of that information. So if you want to know what AI is and how you can use it in your business, tune into that at 11 or show up here and see that in person. Registration is available on the RVAR website. We also have our back to school drive that'll be going on from July 31st to August 1st. You can drop your donations at the RVAR office. And the RVAR Family Fun Night at the ballpark will be on August the 8th. And you can register for that on the website as well. Finally, our newest member benefit offered by Virginia Realtors is Forewarn. If you haven't checked it out, be sure you check that out. It is a safety app that allows you to check out prospective buyer or seller using their phone number. There are instructions for setting it up on the MLS dashboard and in the latest newsletter. So for today's class, Bob Hartman is a realtor with RealStar Realtors, and he's the go-to resource along with when his fellow realtors need help navigating the HUD process. If you've never done that before, this will be a great time for you to get your feet wet. Thank you, Bob, for sharing your expertise today, and I'll turn it over to Bob now.
Thank you, Beth. I am on the education committee as well. I'm a rookie. It's my first year, and glad to join you today. A little bit about me. I grew up in Michigan, Detroit area, moved down here to coach women's soccer at Roanoke College 38 years ago. So like yesterday. Met my wife there. I have 2 kids getting married this year. So I have a tip jar up here. We'll use that as my tip jar. Sponsorships available, ice sculptures, hors d'oeuvre trays, we can set you up. I am by default a foreclosure guy, and it was because back in the day, foreclosures paid 5% about 24 years ago. And that was exciting to me as a new guy in the real estate business, have a sale and make 5%. Well, it came with some strings attached. You had to use blue ink on the contract. At that time, I used a typewriter to type in the address of the property. I had that erase tape. So if you made an error, you had to use your erase tape and then overnight it to Washington, D.C. to HUD for them to accept it. And then if you didn't initial in the right place, you had to do all that over again. And it was back in the day of the telephone book, black and white MLS days. So things have changed. So I am glad to inform you that it's much more technology driven now. And I'm going to go through kind of the basics and then get into the how to. But I think the most important thing today is ask questions, because I want you, knowledge is the fruit of real estate, and foreclosures is unlike any other animal that you tackle, because I don't want you to have to go to your client and say, I don't know. And that's the most frustrating thing, I think, in our business, where you pull up an MLS sheet you see what it's about, but you don't know how to get it over the finish line. And that can be really frustrating. I'm gonna start a little bit with kind of the trends, and you're gonna have to, I am very fidgety on my computer, so I'm gonna do the best I can to go through this and not have you, let's see if I can. So when foreclosures hit the market, and we've kind of seen a pattern of this, I'm hoping you're seeing a full screen of a graph. And in 2009, you can see the peak of the foreclosure business in America kind of hit a high point. And what you also see in this graph is that we had kind of another blip in 2012, and it's really hard to see the years. But when you get your packet emailed to you, I promise I'd go over there and point, but I've been told that Beth has like a rope that, like a bungee cord, she's gonna pull me back. So I'm not gonna do that. But in 2012, we kind of hit another blip, and then you can see the graph tail off like a cliff when the pandemic hit in 2019. Largely, foreclosures have slowed. Maybe it was the pandemic stimulus packages. Maybe people got that and went to Cabo and weren't really worried about their mortgage. Maybe it was the moratorium on foreclosures. I don't really have insight into why it slowed, but all those factors were key. You can see that some of the states that were a little bit more affected were in the Midwest. I know Illinois, Connecticut, New Jersey, we're up this year 3% from the previous month, but down 4% from last year. While I don't want to spend too much on this slide, I can tell you we are not one of the states with a ton of foreclosures. Why is that? My personal reflection on that is because Virginia has kind of three pockets of industry and economic areas: Northern Virginia, Tidewater, Richmond, and then we're kind of the stepsister over here in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And I think that has allowed us, while our values maybe are not consistent with Northern Virginia, Richmond, and Tidewater, they're not so far behind. And maybe homeowners with a mortgage haven't had to play catch up. What's going on locally? I can tell you that right now our MLS probably has 2 or 3 HUD foreclosures in it. One just came on the market on Poplar in Salem. I have one coming on. And I want you to, just full disclosure, this isn't about me and selling HUD properties, because I've never not sold a HUD property as being a listing agent, but it's more about the information that I hope you gather to be armed and ready to do your own business and not have to call me and say, Bob, what do I do? This is Greek. And it is Greek, and we're going to go through that. But long story short, in the last 30 days, we probably have 3 or 4 locally. I can tell you, and you've driven around the Roanoke area, there's a lot of foreclosure stickers on doors. And I think the trend is going to be that we're not going to get back to 2012 or 2009, but I think it's going to be such that you want to have the knowledge to go forward with it. And I think we're going to see it grow, because I think as we come out of this, economic situation, as interest rates even hopefully dip, I think we're going to see more foreclosures. So that is kind of a crystal ball of what I see as a trend. I know you kind of want the basics, and I'm going to kind of bring you the basics. And if this insults your intelligence, tell me, because I'll keep moving. But there's some websites out there that try and confuse you. And I call them faux websites, but long story short, this wasn't always the case. I want to make sure when you sell a HUD property, you're on the right site. About, what, 6-8 months ago, Laura Benjamin called me and said, I've got a guy on the phone. He said he's looking at a piece of land at Smith Mountain Lake. It is in our MLS. It's not a foreclosure, but it's on a foreclosure website, which is a little bit scary. And so I said, Laura, that can't be on a foreclosure website. I checked it out. It certainly was. It was the MLS photo out of the agent's posting. It was at the lake. It was on the market. It was not a foreclosure. The lady had people in her yard swearing it was a foreclosure. And to make matters worse, this person, just an average Joe, had paid to get on that foreclosure website to get this information. And so I want you to start at the right starting point. And I think the best thing to say is this is the HUD website. And all I can tell you is it has changed over the years. It looks identical to this. The logo at the top left, you can see kind of two buildings, and then it says HUD Home Store is kind of what you're looking for. If I were to plug in an address into the website, it would go straight to that city and state, and you were able to get to the subject property. HUDhomestore.com, HUDhomestore.gov. When you do a Google search, we all know it's like booking a hotel. You want to go stay at a Hilton and you get Expedia. No different here. So I am going to share a couple other websites that are faux websites. This is not what you want. HUDforeclose.com. The interesting about this website is it really resembled the old. So here's the whole old HUD website with the state, and you'll notice they've copied that and allowed to confuse us. Nonetheless, this is not what you want. HUDforeclose.com, or I believe this is the one that sent us to the Smith Mountain Lake area to search. This is one I believe you have to pay to join, and it's, what does it say, Homes USA, but it's very obviously a similar site, looking site, and it says foreclosed homes find, and the entry is the same as the HUD Home Store site to plug it in. Some of you are shaking your heads, and it's just confusing. So I thought I'd start there because I don't want people to get wrapped up in the wrong site. And again, I am trying to navigate my own site, as you can see. What I think is important is we know kind of what we need to start to input a bid to get a foreclosure done. And there's really two practices. The first practice is to input the bid correctly. And then the troubling part is you're just halfway home there, right? So if you get the bid acceptance, how do you get it to the closing office and completed? And so I'm going to try and help you with that as best I can. So I work for an asset manager. So HUD offers a contract and it's put out to bid about every 3 or 4 years. And there's asset managers. Back in the day when I told you about the 5%, there were about 3 asset managers for us locally in our MLS that did HUD foreclosures. Now there's 1. And the company is out of Atlanta. It's called Rain. It used to be a company called Sage. There was a company called Hometelos. Some of you are probably more experts on the names than I am, but those are a few over the years. So long story short, the one asset manager, an asset manager has what's called special assets. And I've been asked to define that. A special asset is a non-performing loan, right? You don't pay, you don't stay. Well, an special asset, my wife's in banking and she said, I was like, why do you call them special assets? And she's like, we don't want to call them terrible loans. You know, it's kind of like we sugarcoat it a little bit. But those are really big in the banking industry to make sure they don't fall in that kettle of non-performing special assets. So all banks have special assets. I doubt there's a local bank or a national bank that doesn't have any special assets. But what happens is when those special assets need to be written off the books or they explore options to get rid of it, we as a MLS and me as a listing person for an asset manager are called and they say, do a BPO. Tell us what it's worth. What we need to get rid of this special asset. What happens is the process before a home even comes on the market, before it even goes in HUD Home Store, the field service team, FSM, you're going to see that acronym, FSM gets it and they clean it out. HUD properties typically are not the most beautiful. They're not staged and ready. They have gnarly stuff in them sometimes, and even when they're cleaned out, there's a question of whether it was cleaned out. So anyways, before it gets to HUD Home Store, we've got a property that needs to be sold. Before you can sell it, you're going to need certain things. And one is an NAID number, which is name identifier. And every broker in Roanoke, I guarantee, has one. I know the RealStar one by heart. I don't know the others. But if you don't know what that is, that's a good place to begin your list of stuff you need to sell a foreclosure, especially a HUD foreclosure. The other thing that you're going to need is to make sure your broker updated that annually, because if you didn't or she didn't, then you're going to have to send in a document and get it registered. They can do that on HUDHomestore.com. Your broker can sign your brokerage up on HUDHomestore.com. The other thing is you're going to need to familiarize yourself with the property on the website. And I think rather than go there right now, I think if we have time, we'll do that later. And I think it would confuse you. I want to kind of go through ABCs and then, you know, we'll have the trial run as we go. See if I can see. What are you going to need? So the NAID number is 1. Your buyer's social security number or federal tax ID number is the other. If there's one buyer, their name, full name and address. If there's two buyers, you know what to do, get them both. When it asks for your bid, they're asking for their current address, not their vacation home in Myrtle Beach. You're going to need their email address, their cell number, their bid amount, and if they're asking for closing costs, HUD for years has only allowed you to input up to 3% of your bid price for closing costs. You can't put in more than that. You can try, but I guarantee you it will auto-populate an error or tell you we can do 3% and no more. The other thing that is important is you know what a BSCA is. And a BSCA is your closing office you typically use. But the most important phone call, or one of them, for you as an agent is to call that brokerage and say, Jane Doe, John Doe, are you comfortable doing a HUD closing? I just got an accepted, or I just am beginning to input a bid, and I want to make sure I don't get down the road and you can't do it. The reason I say that, a BSCA, buyer select closing agent, is because you want them to be comfortable so that you can get across the goal line, right? And so we need somebody that's kind of a teammate, because I will tell you two things. They have to be comfortable because they're not going to deal with a human. Very rarely do you work with a human in this process. And it's just a blanket statement. I wish it was different. I wish you could call them up. You can certainly call me up. My cell number was on the outline for today, but I can only get you so far. And one of the things the closing office can do is make sure, because they use what's called a P260 portal to input the information on your buyer, on you as an agent, the settlement sheet, make sure the earnest money was received. Do you want me to go on? Those are kind of the basics. So that call before you place a bid is important. Now you're ready. You're ready to roll. Am I going too fast? Okay. You're armed and ready. You feel dangerous. Your muscles are out. You've got your license number, your real estate license number, your NAID, the buyer, all that buyer stuff. You know who your settlement agent is. You know that you're able to bid in this bid period. By bid period, and I'll cover this a little bit later, there's an owner-occupant period, and then there's an investor period. They will not let you put in a bid for an investor, because you're going to see flags go up in the bid process that say, warning, warning. Are you representing an investor? You can't represent an investor, boom, boom. So it won't even let you get past the 50-yard line, okay? So, but the investor bid period will be on the website when the period for the owner occupants ends. There's usually a 2 or 3 day gap before the investor period begins. If the property is uninsurable, those bid periods are much smaller. You're like, what's uninsurable? What's insurable? What's a bid period? Well, on that website, which we'll show you in a little bit, there's a ticking time clock, and it'll say exclusive bid period deadline is 8 days, 4 hours, and 3 minutes, and it'll actually show you the clock. You can call me, and I'll tell you what to do. I'll tell you have to be patient. If you have an owner occupant, put your bid in. Or if you don't feel comfortable putting your bid in, wait and then put your bid in. But long story short is, if you have an owner occupant, there's really no reason to wait if you've got all the stuff you need. and you've shown the property. You've gotten the basic information, but pay attention to bid periods, okay? Because that's really important. It's going to ask whether you're a HUD registered bidder. And to register on HUD Home Store is very simple. There is no cost. You put in your email, you have a password. You do it in the top right-hand corner of HUD Home Store. Once you do it, you're done. Although it is going to ask, I believe, for your license deadline date. So you may have to update that as you go, just like you do with continuing education. Once you hit submit an offer, or the other button is a submit an offer button, you'll press that and it's going to immediately ask for two things: your NAID number and your license number, and the fact you're not a robot. So those three things will get you in the bid portal. If you fail those three questions, I can't help. So we've got in the portal, and then you're gonna get ready, kind of lights, camera, action. You've reached the input page and you have 14 minutes to put in a bid. You're kidding me. HUD gives you a time limit on how long? Yes, the good news is after that 4 minutes, if you screw something up, if you don't do something right, if you don't put in the right social security number, if something comes back at you, you can start all over again. I know it's frustrating. They didn't have a ticking time bomb for us as agents to put in a bid. Why that is, I can't explain it. But the other thing is, once you get past that entry screen and you plug in your price, two things are going to happen. It's going to auto-populate 3% to you and 3% to the listing agent. Okay, it's just going to automatically do that. I will tell you one thing HUD is really interested in, and one of the only things they're interested in is what?
Right.
What they're going to make, their net. And so,
sorry to interrupt, is that going to change because of the changing commission issues that we're having now?
I believe it will.
Repeat the question, please.
Oh, I'm
Sorry.
sorry. She asked, thank you. She asked if the commission structure on the HUD portal is going to change for us when we input a bid. And the answer is, I believe it's got to. And so I will tell you, though, HUD is really slow to react. And I don't mean that in a demeaning way. It's just like
It's
government, and it's slow and it's evolving, and they probably are not going to be the first. They're not going to be the locomotive on that. But great question. The other thing you can do as a buyer's agent, so that the net to HUD is bigger, you can adjust your commission. I'm not saying you want to do that. Yeah, a lot of people are laughing. So I can tell you some agents have done that when they know there's a competition and they know their buyer's not going to pay more than X. And you know that you want to be competitive and you want to sell something, because 2% of something is better than 0% of nothing, right? Or 3% of nothing. So the long story short is they still allow you to do that. It's rare, but it's on there. So that's kind of the initial first page of the bid input. It's going to auto-populate. It's going to ask you your buyer type. I will tell you, under financing, you're only going to have 203K, 203B with escrow, straight 203B, which is a straight FHA loan in their acronym, cash or conventional. Okay, so you're going to have to choose one. If you've got a VA loan, I would just do cash or conventional. There is an amendment form you can submit if it's a crazy loan product that is not on there after you get an accepted bid or during the bid process. Does that make sense? So that's those are your options. The other thing is they're going to ask you if you want to allow them to keep your bid as a backup bid. I always do that. And I don't know that everybody does that, but that's, if you put in a lowball bid and 3 months later, the property's still on the market, it was way overpriced, they reserve the right to come in and choose your bid again. Now, you don't have to accept that at that point, but it does allow you to go back to your buyer and say, you know what, remember back last March, we put in that bid on 422 Annex and we got it, or we didn't get it. And now I got a notification that we got the bid. So then at least you can go to your buyer and say, hey, do you want it? And they're probably going to, no, we bought this other property, but at least you can do that. The other thing is there is a huge conflict of interest for the listing broker, the FSM, anybody buying a HUD property that is related to anybody within the circle of HUD process. And that's also on your bid input sheet, but just know that they're really concerned with that. You put in your primary purchaser information. If there's 2 buyers, you put them both in. I can tell you, if you screw up the social security number, it's a huge, colossal problem. I know it typically is not. You can erase it. No, not with them, because I've seen them accept a bid, determine the social security number is wrong for your buyer, and go to an alternate bid. I know, gasp. How tough it is to go back to your buyer and say, you know what, we got it, but then we didn't get it. And because I put in a 3 and your 3rd digit was a 4. So the other thing you'll put in on that bid input sheet is your buyer select closing office. I know it's an acronym, but it's gonna show up as that. And they're going to want to know the office. It will auto-populate certain offices in Roanoke, and it will also auto-populate the typical closing officer at that firm that does the closings. It will auto-populate their phone number. If it doesn't auto-populate that, you put it in, you're good to go. If you're sure your office does closings, don't stress. But they also are involved in this process, because I will tell you, one of the issues, and we'll get to it in a minute, is making sure the closing office is up to date with their state certification and their E&O insurance. So just know that that's always in play, that information is important. And then when you get your bid in, when you put in the buyer select closing office, it's going to ask you twice whether your bid is right. And your bid is going to show up on a new screen: bid price, closing costs, agent commissions. It will have the buyer select closing agent, type of loan, all wrapped in a neat bow. And it'll say, are you sure? And then you would click yes, or you're going to have to start back. You can go back a screen, correct something, and then go forward. A question, and I'm going to bring it up: once you input a bid, can you change it? And the answer is yes. The nice thing, the HUD Home Store site allows you the ability to modify your bid. If you want to just start a brand new bid, you can, but remember that 15-minute time clock it took you to put the bid in? It's probably easier to modify it. You do get a new bid acceptance number, but the other thing it does is it gives you the ability to change really anything on that initial bid. And you'll see on HUD Home Store, once you put a bid in, a lot of people will call me, they'll be like, did they get my bid? And I was like, I don't know, because I can't see it. And I can't see anything you do on there. And a lot of agents will call me, Bob, was I the highest bid? And I'll be like, I don't know. And I hope I don't know, because what if I were to have a bid I put in and you're telling me that Josephine just put in X number amount? I don't want to know that. And so the other thing it does, though, it protects me, it protects you. But the other thing I think is really important at this point to tell you, and it's just a tip, and it's not something you have to do, but if you're going to offer 120,000 for a HUD property or a foreclosure, I would do an odd amount. I would do an odd amount because of this reason. If Beth at MKB put in 120 and myself at RealStar put in 120, and both those bids, they don't care if it's cash, they don't care if it's a 203K loan. All they're looking at is their bottom line. So they're going to say we tied. And you know what they're going to do? Anybody know? Flip a coin. And so I've had agents call me at the end of the process and say, it closed and I put in that same dollar amount. And I'm like, yeah, and I'm sorry. And there's some people, and I won't mention the buyers' names, guys that have bought HUD property back in the day, long tooth buyers that always put in odd numbers. And so just to keep in mind, I'm not saying you have to do it, but to go 120,050 or, even $5 above, you're better off, so that you don't get in the tie goes to the runner type thing. And so those are things that are helpful. When you put your input, you hit that last button, kind of like, okay, I'm done. You're going to get a bid submission document with about a typical bid input submission number would be 15800243110928842. And that's all it is. But it means your bid went in the system and you're good. I typically, because you're going to need that number when you do if you get an accepted bid or if you check the bid, I always screenshot that or print that document, because it's good to have, and it's good so that you can go back and say to your buyer, I think it's in, or no, it's in because I've got this. Does that make sense? Okay. I know it's not, here's where the rubber meets the road. You get excited about a HUD property, your buyer's excited. If you don't know this process, you're calling me and saying, we're bringing you an offer and I need you to send me disclosures. At which point myself or the listing agent says, no and no. I don't want your offer, and no, the disclosures don't apply. RVAR forms don't apply. My goal is that you become experts in doing this, so that instead of saying, I don't know to your buyer, you can say, I got it. We can do this. And I'll show you how we do this. And I think Laura mentioned, or maybe Beth mentioned, that we are going to send you the documents that I use today as a tutorial, because I know you don't like calling the listing agent, because not all listing agents are as pleasant as I am. Just kidding, just kidding. Remember my tip jar, wedding in September the 21st. Okay. So it's probably good to do this acronym list right now. And this is just, how are we on time? Are we good? Everything's good?
We're 11:42.
Okay. So I think it's good in like 15 minutes to stretch and get some blood flowing and take a 5-minute break. Is that okay?
We can't take a break because the Zoom people won't be taking a break.
Oh, I'll do Zoom with these people while you guys can, is that okay to do? No,
No, you need
Against
to
the
keep
rule.
going.
okay, keep
Yeah.
going. Shut up, Bob, keep going.
You can do some calisthenics while you're
Okay.
standing there, that'll be okay.
Well, acronyms are important, especially for HUD, because that's all they know, HUD, right? So our acronyms, I think, are really key. And when you put in a bid and you go to check it, you're gonna be nervous that you got an accepted bid or not an accepted bid, or you've got an acronym, you have no idea what it is, like OBS. And so that is other bids selected. So if you see that, I'm sorry, you didn't get the bid. AC stands for accepted, you got the bid. CA is not bad news, but it means you can try again. And it means that you didn't get the bid, but nobody else got the bid. And then field service team I covered, BSCA I covered, NAID I covered, LLB is local listing broker, asset manager is Rain currently. Trying to think if there's any other acronyms I left off. If there are, we'll hit them as we go forward. So the other thing I think is important is there's some parameters to bidding. And so I'm going to try and go here.
There's one acronym that you gave early on, and I know what it means, but somebody else doesn't, and that was BPO. Could you repeat that? and just
Okay,
explain what
yeah,
that
Beth
is?
just asked what a BPO, broker price opinion. And so behind the scene, behind the closed curtain, while the field service team is cleaning out the house and the listing broker is doing a BPO and an inspection and photos and keying the house. I'll bring up keys here in a second. The BPO is used by the asset manager to set the price, but they're also getting that property appraised. And so when they do that, they will either consult with me or not consult with me. And so the next step is once they set the price, we'll do an RTL, which is a ready to list. And that means the listing person goes back out to the house, the appraiser's done at that point, and we send the photos that you see in the MLS and the photos you see in HUD Home Store to them. And usually there aren't a ton of pictures, right? It's better than one photo typically, but it's not a ton of photos. But long story short, how do you get in HUD properties? So I'm going to give you, again, behind the veiled curtain, every HUD key you could get at Security Lock and Key. You're like, what? Yeah, back in the day, we would get a set of HUD keys and we would keep them at our brokerage. And then they would go missing, right? Because somebody would use them and they wouldn't return them. Agents always return stuff, right? No. But what some savvy agents have done is they decided, well, I know it's a quick set and it's still to this day a quick set lock and it's still 5 numbers. And I will guarantee you could mark down to Security Lock and Key and get a set of HUD keys. They used to have them on the wall because the foreclosure dip is what it is. And you saw the graph, they probably don't have them on the wall. But if you want to call me, text me, email me and say, Bob, I'd like to be able to get in there at midnight because my buyer just got off work and he can't go tomorrow, and I know the bid deadline is at midnight, and we're trying to get a bid in, I'll be happy to help you with that. There's typically a coded box, a blue RVAR box, but if you want to be really savvy and professional and your toolbox has HUD keys, let's do it. So bids. What happens if I put a bid in on Friday? Well, bids can be submitted 24/7, but they're not going to look at that Friday bid or that Saturday bid until Monday morning. Or in the case of a Monday holiday, Tuesday, because they're not working. There is no time preference. I've had some agents say, we are going home now and we're going to put in the bid. It's 3:30. We'll have our bid in by 4:30. It's not going to help you. They're not going to accept your bid before that bid period deadline. A buyer can only submit one bid per property, and they've got to fall in that bidding period. You got to have the right type of bidder. Hope that makes sense. So again, Friday, Saturday, Sunday bids are considered the same. Winning bids are selected not by a human automatically. You could be waving Benjamins at me, you know, at the property. You have a cash buyer, they don't care. I told you about the random bid acceptance. If you want to withdraw a bid, you can. Much like withdrawing or modifying, you go back in and withdraw your bid. If for some reason you do something wrong on withdrawing your bid, you don't have to accept the bid if you get it. A lot of people are like, that's going to mess up my HUD score. My HUD, you know, the Russian judge gave me a 10 last year for HUD input, and now I'm going to be a 2. No, it really doesn't affect your standing with HUD, as long as you communicate and be professional and send in. I wouldn't call, but send an email saying my buyer has decided not to go forward. What else? I think that's covered all that. You can check your bid results. You are going to get, and I'll show you this toward the end. The winning bid is not called. You're not sent a fruit basket with the, but you'll get an email. Okay. They're like, I don't have anything. Well, then you either got OBS or CA or one of those other acronyms. But if you got AC and you haven't gotten anything, then I would let the listing broker know. But you should get an email. I'm not going to jump to that email, but I'll show you what that email looks like here at the end. One of the things that I think is important to note is once you get that accepted bid email, their clock is ticking because they don't wait for anybody. We might wait for them on a few things, but they aren't going to wait on you to get your stuff together. So the two things that as a list or as a buyer agent that you want to be aware of is you want to make sure you go get, and you can tell your buyer this, and I probably should have brought this up. You want them to know they've got to get a cashier's check. And I will tell you, it's going to be for $1,000. And I say it's going to be $1,000 because we don't get many HUD properties above, I think it's 350, where it would change the earnest money. So it's got to be a cashier's check or a money order for $1,000 made payable to who? To the closing office. That BSCA office is who gets that money. Don't think that they can wait till next Tuesday to get that document. That document, the cashier's check, typically goes to the listing office. That's the way it's supposed to happen. If you have a close relationship with that closing office and you want to document it's taken there, and then let the listing broker know. You're also going to have to send the listing broker a copy of a PDF of the check. The other thing you're going to need is the lender letter or verification of funds. So that's another kind of start box. Hope you do this before you get too far down the road, is get a lender letter, which I know most of you do. I mean, nobody goes in their car and takes a client around without the lender letter, right? Of course we don't. So you don't want to scramble for that, but I think it's important to note that you get that. Those two things are real close to getting your part as a buyer's agent done. So then let's say there is a property that's been on the market a while. And I should have brought this up earlier. You see RE Global at the top there. And while I don't think it will confuse you, RE Global was the asset manager before the current one. And there are counter offers with HUD properties. And especially during the investor period, where if you put in a bid, like a snake belly bid, and you got a rejection, but you hit the box that said, consider my offer down the road, or don't cancel my bid. I will tell you, counter offers go out in mass to whoever placed a bid. So the counter offer too is going to tell you one thing, and you're going to have to figure out the second thing. It's going to tell you what the net number HUD wants. And that net number may be an odd number. And actually 8 out of 10 times it's a number that is $120,542. And you're like, what the what? And so what you have to do is make sure, if you go back in and submit a new bid, is know that you're doing 6% above that number, so that your net, well, 6% and a few pennies above that number, so that your net to them is above that threshold. And I will tell you, it happens all the time that agents will put in their bid, and it is what they didn't look at the net, and they thought they put in a bid that was within the acceptable range, and it wasn't, and they didn't get the property. But the other thing that applies here too is what I told you earlier. A lot of agents get so excited about meeting the threshold that they don't think that Joe down the street at Keller Williams probably put in $5 above that net. Again, keep in mind, if you're competing, which you will be in that foreclosure marketplace, to go a little bit above. Or I would just, you know, try and keep that in mind. There, a lot of times when you get the accepted bid and there's notes, your E&O insurance for your closing office is not current, you aren't going to get a e-DocuSign package started until you get them what they want. And the most key thing that you're going to get is instructions from them on that email that said you got an accepted bid, but it's going to say you're going to have to go to accepted bids on HUD Home Store, and there's a tab, accepted bids, and that's probably going to be the only one in that tab, and it's going to take you to a contact checklist. And the contact checklist is going to allow you to upload documents. so it's also going to send you an email. And it's going to send you an email that says, did you get our bid acceptance? And it's final verification of everything you already put in that bid. And so you're going to get an email, and you unfortunately aren't going to get your e-DocuSign document until that is, and it's going to come to you as a DocuSign. So you're going to have to click on it, check it, and hit finish for the next step to happen. And I've had agents sit for days and like, I'm waiting on the e-DocuSign document, what's going on? And it's because you didn't accept that initial verification. So you have to do those two things. You get the email, and then you're going to get in a DocuSign format, and then you're going to go to HUD Home Store, and you're going to click on that tab I just told you to click on. It says accepted bids. You're not done, but you're close. And then it's going to send you to the checklist over on the right, and I'm not going to move, but there's going to be a checklist tab, and then with that is going to be a drop down. I told you about having the social security numbers right. If your emails are wrong, guess what's going to happen to that DocuSign document? Somebody else is going to get it, or it's going to go in the trash. So you hit on checklist, right? That's real easy. I'm insulting your intelligence. You're going to see your buyer's name. You're going to see their email. You're going to see their social. You're going to see their address. You can change all that at this point, only at this point. You aren't going to have to go back to the new bid process. You can change that here. So there's also a button, a verify purchaser box, that's about as tiny as my thumbnail, that you're gonna have to click. Again, click on the verify box, and you're going to do the same information for your broker, and then also your closing office. 3 people, 3 emails, because you're done. At the end of this upload, as a buyer's agent, you're done. So you'll see at the bottom here, it'll have e-signature checklist. And if there are changes, you'll hit save signer changes. They're going to ask you if you uploaded the E&O insurance for your. So here's another key factor. Your closing office has the ability to upload their own E&O insurance or yours for your brokerage to the office of HUD, in this case, RAIN, so that your bid doesn't get lost in the process. But so at the end of that, after verifying all your emails and your buyer's name, their address, real important, you hit save title changes or save changes at the bottom. So, okay, this gives you an idea of the earnest money I talked about. I was wrong. So anything up to under 50,000 is $500 earnest money. Always has to be a cashier's check or money order. And then sales price greater than 250 is 2,000. Any questions at this point? Concerns? Going too fast? Keep going. Pre-qual letter gets uploaded, or proof of funds letter gets uploaded as a PDF in that checklist. And it's got to be within the last 30 days. Have they flagged people on that? Yes, because we all have that proof of funds letter from our buyer from 2022, right? It's in our file on our desktop, but it's got to be current. And then there is a spot on the checklist for broker authorized signer. And this kind of goes against all HUD government rules, in my opinion. There Apple order, right? You got to do it this, check this box, hold your head like that, got your cashier's check. And now they ask, do you want to sign for your broker? And you can get a letter from your broker if he's in Hawaii. If Kit Hale is in Cabo and can't sign, or whoever, you can get a letter saying, John Doe can sign for me as broker, should he get a bid acceptance on a property. And I've done these in the past with my broker, and I just do them annually to have it. You can upload that document, so when the e-DocuSign document goes out, you can sign for your broker. I know, it's not the best, but if you do have an LLC that buys as an investor, and there is a case where a LLC might buy a property in some different categories. For example, let's say a church might, so their federal tax ID number is important when you put the bid in, and then you're going to need their articles of incorporation or their formation papers to upload. Does that make sense? They are going to review that accuracy once your checklist goes back to them. And then your DocuSign document will go out when they want it to go out. And I don't mean to laugh at this, but I think it's important to know you're at the mercy of them. And a lot of my frustration is not so much, what's a good way to put this? Their timeline is their timeline, and you're going to have to go with it. Because when you get that bid accepted on Tuesday, it's very common to not get the e-DocuSign document set up, even though you have 48 hours to get your stuff to them. And I don't think I mentioned that. Your time is ticking. So you get it to them by Thursday, and then typically they're going to compile that DocuSign document. It'll go out next week. But you just have to bird dog it. I don't know how to tell you any other way. This might be a good time to open this screen if I can. So this is, gosh, I'm doing stuff I probably don't want to be doing here. This is a good example of a recent bid acceptance email. So I've tried to cross through some things, but this is what your email will look like. And it will tell you a lot of the same things I've told you, but it'll have your bid acceptance number on it. It'll say that you did have the winning bid, and I would just keep track of it. The other thing is every HUD property has a case number. And so your case number is going to start with 544 or 541. Why I know that is because I've watched this process for the last 24 years and I know it, and that is just the case. So everything you do, every email you send out, everything you do is going to be tied to that case number. If you have a problem with changing loan product, if you have a change in the closing date, if you have an issue with an amendment, a termite letter, a lead-based paint problem, that case number's got to be on everything. So just so you know that. And so that's kind of important. I don't want you to get too wrapped up in that letter, but it's just going to come to you as a non-discrete email that they're going to expect you to see. So once you click that, I don't know, can you all see that? Okay, I'm going to try it. So you clicked, everything was okay with your checklist. And you good to notify the closing office that it's coming, but you don't need a contract extension yet, but know that there's not going to be a closing date on your contract. It's going to say that you're going to have to close if you have an owner occupant. FHA is 45 days, conventional loans 30 days, a investor is 30 days. If you need an extension, I will tell you this too. Tip number 2 is they will grant you an extension if it's loan related, typically for 15 days. So don't feel like you're up against turning into a pumpkin, but know that typically they'll grant you an extension. After that, they're going to make you do what? Pay. And then another thing I haven't covered, but I hope you're understanding of this, they expect you to do a home inspection. They're just not going to fix anything. So I've had people say, oh, they found a loose joist in the basement, and the HUD's going to fix that, right? That's structural. And the answer is no. So how do you get utilities turned on? So right now we're in between field service managers. Right now it's blmco.com to turn on your power, your water, your gas, whatever you need to get a home inspection done. You're going to have to synchronize your dates on that site so it's within HUD's window of getting it done. If it's an FHA loan, this is kind of nice. They will do a termite letter for you. If it's not FHA, you are up to your own devices to get a termite letter. The other thing with FHA, I've seen them treat the property if it does show it needs to be treated, but that's not gospel, okay? But know that they do that. And then the other thing on lead-based paint, which is kind of neat, everybody's done a lead-based paint stabilization, right? Well, if you haven't, it's amazing. You got it one time, you've got to go through it, because for some of the older sections of Roanoke, the Raleigh Court area, South Roanoke, some parts of Southeast, yada, yada, lead-based paint probably is still maybe a factor, okay? So if you do a stabilization test, and they will do that, your buyer doesn't pay for that. They will pay up to $4,000 to stabilize. And if you've ever gotten a stabilization document back, I will tell you, it is very detailed. And if it exists and your buyer doesn't have to pay the $4,000, that's a blessing, and it's kind of covered under the process. It is only applicable, as I understand it, if they did a government loan. So if I'm wrong on that, you can call me to the carpet. These don't apply because the amendments that you'll send, and I don't have a slide for this, but all documents go to rainandcompany.com. And Rain & Company is in Atlanta. On their website, you'll see their forms, and you use no RVAR forms. That's all Rain documents right now. And they have an amendment for all things, including a release of the contract. You can't use an RVAR form to release a HUD contract. You send the HUD document in, they have to stamp it, sign it, and then you can go to your closing office and retrieve your earnest money. But they are really good about returning earnest money. I can tell you, if it goes beyond what they call the 17-day window from the time you get a bid acceptance, or the contract comes to you and you have 17 days to do a home inspection, a termite, a yada, yada, yada inspection, I've seen them go beyond that time frame and give you your earnest money back. So they aren't hard-nosed on that, really. Okay, to close, 45 days for FHA and conventional. Cash is 30. I hope none of you have to live through a 203K loan, but if you do, it's 60 and it'll take longer than that, right? Extensions they do provide. Like I said, after that first granted extension, your buyer's going to pay $150 for 15 more days. They will prorate that amount at closing. So know that if you're so close, if your mortgage officer is so close to that clear to close and it doesn't happen, know that that $150 will be prorated. A big deal? It probably is to your buyer at this point. So yes, some of those addresses don't apply. One thing to know is, and this post-closing information is not important, know that you're not finished when closing ends, because your closing officer has to upload documents through that portal to HUD to finish the process. And it, you know, a conversation I think is a good one to have with your closing office you love to use is, can you do a HUD closing? When you have another closing, say, hey, are you comfortable doing a HUD closing because I might get one? And are you familiar with the portal? And so, yeah, that's important. If an appliance goes missing during the time you get a accepted contract and a completed contract, they will credit you. Know that a home inspection is great. Know that, and this is probably a good time to talk about what's available to you on HUD Home Store. Am I good on time?
It's 12:13.
Okay,
Normally
so
wrap it up and we'll-
yeah, I'm wrapping it up, Beth. Trying to follow the rules. So property condition report is on the HUD Home Store website. Invaluable. Instead of calling me, you could go on there and see if they tested the HVAC. They do it with a generator. The electrical, is it good? Yes, it's good. This is a property in Virginia Beach that's currently on the market. Kind of exciting. Did they test appliances? Yes, good, functional. Water supply? Yes. Pressure test. Is them blowing the lines, the water lines with air? A lot of times there's a toilet flapper that is not shut and it's going to come back, test failed, plumbing issue, run for the hills. Don't do that. I've had so many HUD properties where, and they're just doing their job, where the property comes back with faulty plumbing, and it's really something simple because they don't go to the Western Virginia Water Authority and they don't test the well and they don't make sure that the water is flowing. If it's on, they'll test it and include it in what's called a HPIR, another acronym. Key acronym, because you could call me, and I don't know if I'm allowed to share this, but I do. There's about a 60-page document that the field service team does on everything. Picture of the thermostat, picture of the HVAC, picture of the water, if it's running, picture of the breakers. Is there a faulty breaker? Is there a roof shingle missing? Is there, that document is in my portal or the listing agent's portal, and you can get valuable information from that to ease your buyer. They winterize the property. The other thing that drives me nuts is, do you have to de-winterize it, winterize it? You know, and I had a plumber tell me years ago, you know, it's not a big deal to open up the lines and let water flow if there is antifreeze. And I know they used to charge the field service team $100 to de-winterize a property. I don't know if that's still the deal. And then they do check the roof. So that's what is on your HUD Home Store site under addendums. And all you have to do is click on it. The other thing that's on there that's probably more important is property listing disclosures. And it'll tell you if it's insurable, that your buyer's responsible for inspections, anything to do with termites and mold, water source is all on you. And so what are they going to tell you? Get a home inspection. Are they going to fix anything? No, they're not. Okay, so that's what that looks like. I think it's important that you do a home inspection. I think, and I hope that I'm not going over the boundaries here, but here is a listing in our MLS that is a HUD listing in Salem. And I won't, it's not mine. No, it's not mine. I'm not trying to sell this. But it's going to tell you a lot of things in here that are important before you go to HUD Home Store. But under remarks, it's going to say go to HUD Home Store, right? But it's going to say you're buying it as is. You can't do any repairs to the property before closing. Quick story, I had an investor buy a property and he painted the whole house before closing. Something went sideways and the property looked much better, but he didn't get it. And so it will tell you kind of what to do here. No repairs before closing. Call listing agent for the code. Like I said, you can get your own HUD keys if you want, but going through the coded box or the blue box. I want to leave some time for questions because I know you guys all have questions, right? Throw anything at me. What can I cover that I haven't? Nobody on Zoom or anybody that,
I do.
okay.
You touched base on the inspection utility, so HUD will turn on the utilities.
You will turn on the question is who turns on the utilities? See? HUD won't turn on anything. I will tell you, when you see the property for the first time, I always go to the breaker box, and I know this is probably, I see if the breaker is turned on for the sump or the well pump for whatever reason. And make a mental note, if the main breaker is turned on, and you'll see a note on the electrical box that says sump is on, because the last thing they want is that flooding in the basement. And a lot of these are older properties, and the sump, if it's not on, the field service guy has got to go clean it. Long story short, you go to blmco.com, you're going to get a blessing email back from them, and you're going to turn all the utilities on in your buyer's name for a short period of time.
They have to pay for that upfront.
Yes. And they only give you 4 days to do that, which you might want to synchronize with the appraiser if the appraiser needs to get in there to make sure that the power's on and all that other stuff. It's not difficult, but if it gets to the point where you need more than 4 days, they're good. Just know that they're gonna, when you put those dates in the BLMCO or utility website, you're gonna have to have that grace period.
Cause I had a property at one time that I was looking with a buyer. And the agent said that you're gonna have to, if you're gonna have inspections, you're gonna have to de-winterize, because it wasn't winterized. Re-winterize. And then obviously they're gonna have to de-winterize again, if they.
Yeah,
inspect it.
so she's asking about winterization, and it's a good way to put this. I would consult a plumber, but that's a question too. I would call the BLM, the field service manager. And there's one guy in Roanoke who looks after most of the HUD properties. I can help with that process. I will tell you that.
It could be expensive.
It can be very expensive. And that's where, in July, not really a worry, but November and February, where you're like, oh gosh, our pipe's gonna burst. If we check, do the inspection, and we don't re-winterize, that's why there is some, and I don't have the answer to that, there's a process on the website for that field service group to answer that. Any other questions? Thank you all.
There was a question over there.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Um,
I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. So if, you said the disclosures and things up front will tell you if it's insurable or uninsurable.
Right.
So does that mean HUD automatically will only accept cash offers for that particular property? Since a loan has to have insurance to be approved?
Great point. And she's asking about insurable versus uninsurable. And in many cases, cash is your only option to do an uninsurable product. But insurable products, whenever they do an appraisal on a HUD property before it comes on the market, they always do it FHA style.
Oh, okay.
So you know, they're using that scope of an appraisal so that they can feel comfortable about putting a label of insurable versus uninsurable on it. And as I said, the window for bid periods is shorter for uninsurable, but they are doing an FHA appraisal.
Okay.
And on that disclosure, I put, that's my son and my new daughter-in-law. So nothing in the tip jar, but I thought I'd post that. Anyway, so the best way to do that is use your best judgment, but it'll say on that disclosure whether it is. And then the other thing, I have had an appraisal come back during the live ammunition buyer time that shows repairs under an FHA loan, and we've typically just done an escrow for those items. So can it go from an FHA loan to one with escrow because the buyers don't have any money? Yes. So the answer to that is yes. And then my cell number is, I am free game to help. And I enjoy helping, and I don't mind that call that says, I'm bringing you an offer and it's on RVAR forms. It's just not helpful at that point. But are there, oh, I didn't cover this, short sales, pre-foreclosures, other banks. So I've represented other local banks with special assets. So when those go in the system, the process is typically a little bit different. I didn't have time to cover res.net, but some of you have lived that too, where you have to input a bid on res.net, which is a foreclosure site. I mean, we could spend the whole afternoon and you guys have much more important things to do, but I am available to talk through that too. Short sales are a different animal. I thought rather than get grisly with those, I would hold your hand on you as a listing person on short sales because you can get through that. The reason a lot of foreclosures hit too are reverse mortgages, which I hate to say it, have become common, as we've learned in our education group, that mortgage people have shared with us. I think foreclosures are going this way, and I don't have a crystal ball. I just sense it. So good luck and use me if I can help you.
Thank you.
All right.